The 18th birthday gift I had to share with my brother. I don't even care if I get called an ungrateful, spoiled brat in the comments. I just needed somewhere to say this because I cried myself to sleep thinking about it last night. It was my 18th birthday a couple days ago, and this has genuinely been weighing on me. I had a nice dinner with some friends and my parents on my birthday. I opened the presents my friends got for me, and they were all awesome. Then I opened the present that my parents got for me, which they had been hyping up. They got me a set of coins printed in my birth year in pristine condition, straight from the Australian Mint. It was a really lavish set of coins, and the box it came in had velvet and everything. It would have been a really cool and special gift had they not gotten my brother the exact same thing for his 18th birthday 3 years prior. Ever since we were kids, my brother has loved coins. He always gets the souvenir coins whenever we go somewhere that has them. He makes sure to get every limited edition special $2 coin that comes out. He has a huge collection of every value of coin that he keeps in a special coin collector's book with clear sleeves organized in the year they were printed. He takes great pride in polishing all of his coins as well. I, on the other hand, have never in my life given a single fuck about coins. When they gave my brother that gift, it was thoughtful and genuine and sincere. When they gave me the same thing, it just seemed like they didn't care enough about me or my interests to even bother putting the thought into my 18th birthday gift. It's not like I'm secretive about my interests. I love telling everybody who will listen about them. So I guess they just never listen. Money has never been an issue for my family, and I can appreciate that it was probably expensive, but they say it's the thought that counts, and clearly no thought went into this gift. I'm really hurt because I have always had a suspicion they favor my brother, and this basically confirms it. I can't believe he got such a unique gift tailored to his interests, and I got what is essentially a hand-me-down. And if that wasn't enough, what they said next made my stomach drop. As I held the box in my hands, still trying to smile politely, my mom looked at me with that cheerful tone she always uses when she thinks she's being fair and said, "Of course, you'll share it with your brother. After all, he really loves coins, and it wouldn't be right for him not to enjoy this too." I blinked. At first, I thought she was joking. Share? This was my 18th birthday present. The one day in my life that was supposed to feel special. The one milestone where I expected my parents to finally see me as an adult, to recognize me as me. But no. Within seconds, the gift wasn't even mine anymore. My dad nodded along as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Your brother will really appreciate this. He understands the value of things like this, so maybe you two can keep it together. Something for both of you to treasure?" I wanted to scream, "Treasure? What exactly was I supposed to treasure here? The fact that once again, I was the afterthought, the one whose interests didn't matter, the one who had to hand over even my own birthday gift because my brother deserved it more. The worst part? My brother just smirked. He didn't even pretend to be surprised. It was like he knew all along that this wasn't really for me. Like the whole performance with the box and the velvet and the mint coins was just a formality before it went straight to his collection. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about coins. This was about every single birthday, every single Christmas, every single family dinner, where somehow, some way, I was always the one expected to compromise, to share, to accept less because my brother wanted more. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't say anything. I just closed the box carefully, set it on the table, and excused myself to the bathroom. The tears came before I could stop them, because deep down, it wasn't about being spoiled or ungrateful. It was about being invisible in my own family, about realizing that even on my 18th birthday, the day that was supposed to be mine, I was just a footnote in someone else's story. When I came back from the bathroom, my eyes were red, but I pretended I just spent too long washing my face. Mom noticed right away and asked, "Are you okay?" I answered, "Yes, everything is fine. It's just hot." She smiled and didn't press any further. But my brother looked at me as if he'd won some game I didn't even know about. We returned to the table. The box of coins lay in the middle, and my father said, "Look, son, what quality. This is truly rare. It will be worth even more with age." I said, "But I've never been interested in coins." He frowned. "But these aren't just coins. They have history, value, and investment, and besides, your brother will be helping you look after them. He understands how to take care of them." I replied, "So in fact, this is a gift for him too?" The father nodded. "You could say that. Is it bad to have a common cause?" And I felt everything inside me tighten. I said, "It's my birthday, Dad. I'd like something that has to do with me." Mom intervened. "We thought it would be symbolic. You have something in common with your brother. It unites us." I said, "But since childhood, I've had the feeling that everything is shared, even my holidays." My brother chuckled and said, "Well, you're not going to do that anyway. Why get angry? I can keep it and you'll know we have such a collection." I replied, "At our place? You mean at your place?" He shrugged. "What difference does it make? It's in the family anyway." That phrase, "it's in the family anyway," hit me the hardest, as if I was the odd one out, even in my own gift. I remembered how, as a kid, we got a new gaming computer. My parents said, "It's for both of you," but in reality, he was always the one using it. I got the crumbs. a couple of hours a week when he wasn't home. I kept quiet then, but now it was my 18th birthday, a day that was supposed to be all mine. I said, okay, if you think it's right, then so be it. Mom smiled. See how grown up you are? You know how to share. And at that moment, I realized that I became an adult. Not because I shared, but because for the first time, I realized that my desires had never been important to them. The evening continued, but for me, it was over. The box lay on my brother's lap. He was already opening it and examining each coin as if it were his own personal treasure. My parents looked at him with pride, and I sat next to him feeling like a nobody. After dinner, Mom said, your brother's birthday is in a couple of hours. We'll stop by for his cake, remember? I answered, I remember. Father added, it's a great opportunity to show everyone the set. We'll take the coins with us, present them beautifully, and then, well, it makes sense to keep them with my brother. He already has a collection. He knows how to take care of them. I said, so, on my birthday, you will present my gift on his birthday? Mom said softly, don't overdo it. It's symbolic. You share a common date today. His day begins at midnight. Yours is 18. One family, one gesture. I replied, it's not the date that connects me to him, but the fact that he always offers to share with me, even when it's mine. My brother chuckled and said, you're being dramatic. No one is taking it from you. It's just logical to keep the whole package with me. Security, the system. I said, convenience doesn't change the fact that this is a gift for me. He shrugged and said, do as you wish. But when all this is covered in dust, you'll ask me to take it away. I suddenly remembered how I was once bought a bicycle for 2. My father said, we share it so we don't fight. I replied that it was too small for me, and my brother said, but it fits me perfectly. Then I waited months to ride it. In the end, it was never for 2. It was the same with the PlayStation, the guitar, and the new for 2 phone. I sighed and said, I'm not going with you to the midnight celebration. Mom was surprised. Why? I replied, because today was my evening, and it ended with the words, share. Father frowned and said, you're ungrateful. We invested, got a rare set, and you act like you were given an empty box. I said calmly, they didn't give me a set, but another reminder that my interests are secondary. Mom said more quietly, we wanted it to be beautiful for both of us. I answered, it's beautiful for both when you listen to both. The evening disintegrated into small phrases and awkward pauses. My brother twirled the coins in his hands and beamed as if he was already putting them in his album. I looked at the velvet box and thought that the most beautiful thing about it was the understanding that finally clicked in my head. It wasn't the price or the metal. It was that I was once again being asked to give up my position in favor of logic. As they were getting ready to go to their brother's for midnight cake, their father said, let's go together. This is an important family moment. I answered, no, I'll stay at home. My brother said, do you want me to leave the box with you overnight so I don't have to whine? I looked at him and said, keep it for yourself. It will be like this anyway. Mom sighed and said, let's not ruin the holiday. I replied, you already ruined it when you came up with the idea of keeping it logically at your brother's place. We went out into the hallway. Mom handed me my coat and said, if you change your mind, come over. I shook my head and said, I'll go home. Father said more harshly, are you leaving demonstratively? I replied, I just won't go to a place where my gift is turned into an accessory for someone else's holiday. The door slammed behind them. The silence in the apartment was thick. I sat down at the table, where there were still plates, and suddenly I clearly heard my inner voice. This isn't about the coins. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes. I wrote, gaming computer shared at brother's. Bicycle shared at brother's. Guitar shared was at brother's. Phone shared at brother's. Coin set, mine. Logical to keep at brother's. I added dates next to them. Next to that, I wrote something I'd long been afraid to say. In this family, I'm taught to be comfortable. An hour later, my brother sent me a photo. He was holding a cake box with his parents and candles in the background, everyone smiling. He captioned the photo, look how cool it is. Come visit before it's too late. I replied, celebrate. It's your gift too, as Mom and Dad said. He called me. I picked up. He said, why are you ruining everything? I replied, I'm not ruining anything. I just don't want to play the role you've prescribed for me. He said, what role? I said, the one who always gives in and remains silent. He exhaled heavily and said, you've imagined a tragedy for yourself? My parents wanted to make a gesture for both of us. I replied, they made a gesture for you using my day. He said irritably, fine, let it be as you wish. But when you cool down, you'll realize you were wrong. I replied, I've already cooled down. And I finally realized that I was wrong all this time when I kept silent. I hung up. I sat for a few minutes, listening to the clicking of a radiator somewhere in the apartment. Then I got up, put the kettle on, and suddenly did something I never did. I texted my mom not with excuses, but with the fact. I wrote, I'm not coming. In the future, please give me things that are connected to me, and don't ask me to share it on the very day it was given to me. She replied 5 minutes later, we'll talk tomorrow. I wrote, let's do it. I spent the night not in tears like yesterday, but in a strange clarity. It was painful, but pure, as if I had finally stopped arguing with my memory. I realized that what I had lost today wasn't a set of coins. I had lost the habit of settling for shared, which always means not yours. I I fell asleep toward morning. And when I woke up, I decided that today, for the first time in many years, I would talk to them not as a convenient son, but as a person who also has a right to boundaries. The morning began with silence. I woke up to find missed calls from my mom and brother on my phone. The messages poured in one after another. You've got it all wrong. Why make a mountain out of a molehill? You've ruined the party. We just wanted symbolism. I read it and put the phone back. I decided not to answer right away. I wanted to sort myself out before getting involved in the conversation. A couple of hours later, my father called. I picked up. He said, your behavior yesterday, you realize what it looked like? I answered, like a son who was given a gift, was immediately offered to give it to someone else. He said, not like. It sounded like a grown man throwing a tantrum when someone gave him an expensive gift, and instead of showing gratitude, he put on a show. I replied, I'm grateful, but not for the coin set, but because I finally understand how justice works in our family. He said, stop being dramatic. You've always had everything. I replied, everything is shared. Everything is for two. Everything is on my brother's shelf. He fell silent. For a few seconds, all I could hear was his breathing. Then he said, okay, come this evening. We'll discuss it calmly. I replied, I will come if I can speak without fear of being accused of ingratitude again. I arrived in the evening. The atmosphere was tense. Mom greeted me with a tired face. My brother was sitting at the table, fiddling with a box of coins in his hands. Mom said, we want to apologize if we hurt your feelings. I replied, it's not an if. You touched a nerve. My brother said irritably, you're not a collector anyway. Why do you need this set? It would look perfect in my collection. I looked at him and said, exactly. For you, it's a collection. For me, it's a symbol that my interests are unimportant. Mom tried to smile and said, but it's an expensive, rare gift. I interrupted, and also essentially alien. I love books, music, technology, but not once have you considered choosing any of these. You've chosen the convenient option. Take what's already been done once and repeat it. The brother snorted and said, it's just a bunch of coins. I replied, for me, these aren't coins. They're confirmation that my day can be combined with yours, that my holiday is always secondary. Silence. Father shook his head and said, you're making things more complicated. I said, no, this is the first time I've simplified. I'm being direct. I'm tired of dividing. Mom sighed and said, okay, this set is yours. You can keep it if you want. I looked at her and said, it's not where it stands that matters. What matters is that you finally see the difference between a gift for me and a gift that's convenient for everyone. The brother threw the box on the table and said, take it, since it's so dear to you. I took the box and replied, it's not dear to me, but the moment you started listening to me is dear. After that, I got up and left. On the way home, I felt a strange sense of relief, not because I had the coins, but because, for the first time, I hadn't swallowed the insult. At home, I put the box on the shelf. I sat down next to it and wrote in my journal, today, for the first time, I told them that I, too, want to be the main character in my life, even if in their eyes I look ungrateful. It's more honest than smiling empty-handed again. After that conversation with my family, I felt a strange emptiness. On the one hand, I'd said everything that had been pent up for so long, and for the first time, I didn't swallow the hurt. On the other hand, it became clear that the bridges had been burned. My parents and brother perceived my words as an attack, not a cry for recognition. In the following weeks, the atmosphere in the family remained tense. Every time I visited my parents, I felt an underlying coldness. No one brought up the gift directly, but the silence spoke for itself. My brother demonstratively acted as if nothing had happened between us. However, his gaze betrayed irritation and disdain, as if I'd broken the family's unwritten rule. Silently accept everything given. I began to think about how often my desires were substituted for the convenience of others. As a child, toys were always bought for both, even if they reflected only my brother's interests. At holidays, I often received practical things for the future, while my brother was always given things that reflected his interests. It all added up to one huge pattern, which I refused to notice for too long. The feeling of injustice wouldn't go away. I increasingly retreated into myself, trying to spend less time with my relatives because every conversation turned into a hidden test. Would I say something unnecessary again? I wanted to break out of this cycle of constant comparison in which I was judged through the prism of my brother. Gradually, I realized it wasn't even about the gift. The box of coins sat on my shelf, gathering dust. But every time I looked at it, I saw not a treasure, but a symbol of how I'd always been number two in my family. And it was this symbol that finally forced me to rethink my attitude toward many things. I became more mindful of my own desires and boundaries. If I'd previously agreed for peace of mind, I now allowed myself to say no. When relatives proposed joint plans that again ignored my interests, I no longer automatically agreed. This caused even more discontent, but inside I felt relieved. After some time, I realized that this conflict had actually been a gift for me, not in a material sense, but as a turning point. Until I was 18, I lived as a convenient child, always adapting. But now, I began to learn to be an adult with the right to my own voice. I lived the next weeks like a man who'd suddenly discovered his spine, awkwardly, cautiously, but no longer bending where I'd once automatically. Family gatherings ceased to be obligatory rituals for the sake of peace. If plans devolved into the familiar scenario of convenient for everyone, impossible for me, I didn't fit in. It didn't feel like a demonstrative break. Rather, it felt like a careful restructuring of my trajectory. Fewer random visits, more time for my own affairs, fewer explanations, more facts. The box of coins stood on the top shelf, a reminder of two things at once, of the old order where common meant not yours, and of the new order where what was mine was truly mine. I didn't display the set prominently, I didn't turn it into a relic or throw it away out of spite. I left it in the box like an archive file, stored but not identified. Instead of endlessly trying to be convenient, I started doing what I'd long wanted but kept putting off. I made a wish list, ignoring everyone else's expectations, recording courses, an old synthesizer, several editions of my favorite author, a subscription to a lecture library. For the first time, the money I saved from my part-time jobs went not toward something useful for both of us, but towards something that nourished me personally. It turned out that this wasn't selfishness, but rather air. Things with the family were moving along by inertia. Familiar scenes flashed across shared photos in the chat, my brother with new exhibits, my parents nearby, captions about pride and the collector's legacy. These images no longer burned. A slight tremor of old envy remained, but without the former acidity. Time taught me to distinguish between someone else's history and my own. A month later, I decided to do something I'd been thinking about for a long time. I found a psychologist and showed up without my usual excuses. I walked into the office with two sentences I'd previously struggled to articulate. In our family, favoritism was never called by its name, and that made it seem natural. Examining this was strange and sometimes painful, like smoothing out the wrinkles on a long, folded map. It turned out that the feeling of being number two wasn't rooted in a single gift, but in many small instances where my yes was chosen for me. Acknowledging this meant not blaming, but rather disengaging. I haven't written a letter to my parents yet, but one evening I formulated for myself what I wanted to tell them without arguing. It wasn't about coins or abstract justice, but about something fundamental. Love is attention, and attention is specific decisions in specific moments. In my moment, they chose convenience. Now my choice is to choose me. I wrote it down and felt a space clear in my head. I arrived at the next family dinner with no internal expectation of understanding. Conversations flowed as usual. General news, everyday plans, circular evasions. No one brought up the previous conflict directly. Only occasionally would the familiar, right, slip into their intonations. I truly understood, but I no longer automatically agreed. I left at my own time, not staying late for 5 more minutes. It's a small thing, but from such small things, a new architecture of boundaries is assembled. One day, my brother sent me an invitation to an event for collectors. Previously, I would have taken it as a jab or a supposed demonstration of competence. Now I saw it as simply an event in his life, not necessarily related to mine. He left the invitation unanswered, without anger or explanation. I noted to myself, true freedom also includes the right not to comment. On payday, I bought a used synthesizer, the one I dreamed of back in school. I dragged it home, cleaned it, plugged it in, and spent a long time fiddling with the settings. No practical benefit for either of us, only pure benefit for me. No shared access cues, no usual arguments about who needs it more. A few hours later, music appeared in the room, crooked, uneven in places, but mine. This sound turned out to be the best answer to the coins on the shelf. Metal holds value. Sound holds meaning. A couple of weeks later, I returned to the box. I took out the set, looked at the embossed shine, the velvet, the neat compartments. I took a card and wrote myself a short note, hiding it inside between the description sheet and the plastic cover. The last gift that wasn't about me. I'm keeping it as a marker. From now on, it's only about me. This note didn't require anyone's consent or need to be read. It was enough that I saw it. I approached my next birthday with no expectations from my family. I organized the evening myself. I invited friends, cooked, put together a playlist, and bought myself a gift in advance, a limited edition vinyl of my favorite album. That evening, not a single toast sounded false because no one tried to make it pretty for everyone. It turned out that simple, honest gestures, the very ones I've always lacked, work best when you don't expect others to do them. My parents and I didn't fall out, but we did part with the old illusion. I learned to say no without stinging and yes without asking a price. They seemed to begin to hear the pauses between words. Not right away and not always, but more often. At one point, my mother brought a package containing a book by an author I often quoted. No signature, no explanation, no let's share message, just a book. Perhaps it was a random choice, perhaps my first attempt at listening. I didn't analyze it. I placed it on the shelf and smiled briefly, inwardly, so that only I could hear it. Sometimes I wondered what my 20-year-old self would have done with the coin set. I'd probably have sold it out of stubbornness or returned it in protest. At 18, I left the box on the shelf, not as a challenge, but as a landmark. It reminds me where I no longer live. Another object now sits nearby, a small audio card, bought with my own money, through which I record my tracks. Two objects on the same shelf, an alien symbol and my practice, explain far better than any declaration how exactly I changed my path. Over time, I realized the most important thing. The gift story didn't divide our family into good and bad. It divided the scenarios into those in which I disappear and those in which I remain. In some scenarios, I pretended to fit in with the general and lost myself in the shadows. In others, I chose myself and became visible, first and foremost to myself. This was the adult life they talk so much about at 18. Not about what you'll be given, but about what you allow yourself. When I had to choose what to dedicate the next year to, I chose sound, not coins or explanations. I enrolled in evening classes, got a job as an assistant in a small studio, and began taking my first commissions. My family reacted predictably. Cautious questions about prospects, the usual suggestions to think about something reliable. I responded the way I now know how to respond without words. I posted a schedule on my desk, bought headphones, and started making. And day by day, my small personal stage became the arena where I finally reigned supreme. One day I dusted the top shelf and realized I hadn't thought about that feeling of being number two in a long time. It had dissolved not because recognition had come from outside, but because its place had been taken by something else, warm, stable, resonant. I had built this place myself. Had built, and no velvet box could ever dislodge me from it.